Okay, welcome everyone to our eRequesting Technical Design Group meeting for the 28th of August. I'd like to start with an acknowledgement of country. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we all gather today. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend our respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We acknowledge the First Peoples as the first scientists, educators and healers. The agenda for today, we've got our usual business, approval of minutes and the like, and some other updates. Then I'm going to provide a ballot for working standard update, where we're up to with that. And then we're going to move into reconciliation of some of the ballot issues that have already been raised. So there's a few issues that have been raised, already voted on. We're going to look at doing some reconciliation on those today. So given this is our first time going through this, I will do a bit of an overview of what we're doing and how we're doing it as part of that as well. So we'll spend most of the meeting doing the ballot reconciliation. So as part of our usual business though, we're looking to approve the minutes of the last meeting. So we didn't have one a fortnight ago because the ballot had just opened. We didn't have any agenda items for that meeting. So the previous one was at the end of July, 31st of July. And I've got some minutes here. I'll put it in the chat. Well, so that was, about 4 weeks ago we had this. The key things we went through in this meeting, we've got the presentation and the recording there. We went through the logistics of the ballot. So that was an overview of that. So this meeting, if you weren't at that meeting, it is a good one to go back and have all the detail about what we do in ballot and how it works. I'll go through again some of that a little bit today, not in the same detail as we went through that other meeting, but that's a good one to watch if you were interested in the ballot process or understanding more about it. And then we did a bit of an IG walkthrough at the end of that as well. So there was an action item because we cancelled the following meeting on 14th of the 8th. So that's been done. There's no comments on this page. So I assume that they are complete. Does anyone have any further updates to this page, or would anyone like to make a motion to accept these minutes of the last meeting?
I'll move the minutes, Michael.
Thanks, Michael Osborne. We've got a motion to accept these minutes.
Second, David McKillop.
Thanks, David McKillop. Got a second. Any other questions before I launch a vote? I will find the vote and launch a vote for the approval of the previous minutes. So you can vote on that electronic vote on the screen. If you can't, you can put it in the chat. If you're on the phone, you can just call out your name and give your vote of affirmative, negative, or abstain if you like. Just give that a couple more minutes, or a couple more seconds, rather. All right, looks like voting has slowed down. I'll just give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I'll end that poll. So we have 11 plus 1 in the chat, so 12 affirmative, 0 negative, and 10 abstain. So that motion has passed. We have approved those minutes. So now going into a ballot for working standard update. So we're just going to step back first and see where we are, how we got here. So this is the timeline we've been working through AU eRequesting. Started way back in about January 2024. We went through a whole heap of iterative development on it back in 2024. And then we went out for a ballot for comment. So 12 months ago, we went out for a ballot for comment. We then worked through the resolution of those items right through until about February this year, where we continued our development, and now we're moved into the ballot for STU or ballot for working standard. So this standard for trial use, but we refer to it as ballot for working standard. So we're here now, end of August. We've got a connect-a-thon coming up on the 1st of September next week. And then for the rest of the year, really, we're looking at doing the ballot resolution for this with a target of prepping for publication from December this year. So that's going to be quite a load on us to do that, given our ballot for comment resolution ran right out into February this year. So we've got a small window here where we're targeting the ballot for working standard resolution with publication running through December and I think and it will actually run into February. Our target date for publication is about February 2026. That's where we are. We will also look to do another snapshot of the IG in December for the December Connect-a-thon. So that will really be testing the sort of final version of the IG, which will be our release 1 we're looking to publish. A bit of overview from before about what we're doing now. Previously, we did a ballot for comment, but this time we're doing a ballot for working standard. So this ballot's used to evaluate the content that is eventually intended to be binding on implementers. It's intended to evaluate content that is ready to implement, but where there has not been a significant implementation experience. So this is where it's a working standard, as in it's continually evolving. It's not a normative standard. And we'll, like we do in AU Core and other FIRE specs, we'll do iterative releases to do this to evolve the specification. The ballot gives an opportunity for the community to exercise and evolve the standard in real-world implementation before it's locked down and becomes normative. And we solicit review from the community outside the development participants, so outside our work group, are able to comment during this ballot process. And what the key output of this ballot is, it will authorize the publication of the specification as a working standard through the consensus body. So in order for us to publish, we need to have gone through ballot, and that ballot needs to have passed, and then we can publish release 1 of eRequesting. Bit of a summary again about the voting that happens during ballot. So there's a number of different votes that people can make on the ballot if they're registered to vote through HL7. So there's no vote has been recorded. So this is essentially ignored. So a no vote means that the ballot submission won't count towards a quorum. There is abstain, where the ballot has reviewed at least some of the ballot material, but it's not formed an opinion on whether the specification should be approved or not. Abstaining counts towards a quorum, but not towards whether the ballot passes or not. So then the key two votes are affirmative votes and negative votes. So an affirmative vote, the balloter may have some feedback about minor changes they would like to see, but are overall comfortable with the specification and happy to see the specification published, even if none of their comments result in a change to the specification. So, and this, you can't vote affirmative if you're voted negative against or voted negative against any comments on the specification. So the negative vote is at least one balloter's comment was marked as negative, meaning the balloter feels that specification must not be published until all the issues they marked as negative have been appropriately addressed. So that's what the balloters are doing. They're providing their votes against the specification and determining whether our ballot passes or fail. So a final determination is made whether the specification is passed based on this criteria. So we're working standard. So there's different. When we previously went to ballot comment, we weren't publishing, so there was no pass or fail. Now we're going for a ballot for working standard. So 60% determines whether it's a pass or a fail. So 60% affirmative votes, counting only affirmative versus negative. So the abstain and no vote don't count as part of that percentage. So we're looking for that. So now with that context, give you a bit of an update about where we're at in the ballot cycle. So the ballot is currently open and closes in about a week's time. So we've got 59 voters registered, and there's 10 individuals and 15 organisations, which have about 49 votes between them. So as it stands today, I updated this morning, so it is still changing, but as of this morning, we had 17 affirmative, 3 negative, 11 abstain, and 28 that are still yet to vote. There is a link down the bottom here if you want to keep an eye on this, on how it's going and what's happening with the ballot. There is a ballot page that we have. Put it in the chat. And there are ballot pages here for all the AU specifications. So we have a HL7 AU ballot reconciliation section. There's for base, core, eRequesting, and patient summary as well. So we've got a dedicated page here for eRequesting. It links you out, if you're interested, to the ballot definition, which has the current votes and status for the ballot. It's got this summary, which I've just provided. This will be updated reasonably regularly. It won't be 100% up to date, but once the ballot finally closes, this will be static. It's got a status of our juror issues. There's also a link here to all the ballot issues that have been voted on. And then we've got under this the upcoming votes. So items that are being brought to a TDG for voting, as well as the completed votes. Once we vote, they'll go in here. So you can get a good summary of what we've got, what's coming up, where things are at, what our progress is through this, all through this page. So if you do have a Confluence account, you can go to this page and actually watch it, and then you'll get notification of updates if you want to see where we're at. So, jumping back to our summary. Feedback that we will get through ballot can be a number of different types. And we can have change requests, and that's the default for raising juror issues. This is the default choice. It represents a request for change to the reference specification that is more significant than a mere technical correction. It will be resolved as a vote by the appropriate work group. That's us. Or there's a technical correction. So this is a minor change to the specification that does not impact the behaviour of conformant applications, includes corrections to spelling and grammar or errors with propagating name changes, those sorts of things. Then we also have questions. So we don't normally get these during ballot. So we prefer if you use Zulip to post questions to the community rather than doing it through ballot, but we may end up with one, but it doesn't actually require any action. And then there's also comments. Comments are commentary about specification that is not expected to result in a change to the specification or any response at all. For example, great job in specification. So happy to have those. Sorry, I do have a question here from Vince. One issue has already been reconciled. When did that occur? Okay, so that ties into these. We have a technical correction. So I'll just go back to, oh, too far. Where do we get to? Oh, we're going to get to that, Vince. That's why I did this first. So we've got change requests and technical corrections. So we've got so far 13 issues. That number will continue to evolve. Of those, 12 of them are change requests, and one of them is a technical correction. So jumping to the next page, of those 13, so we've got 12 of those 13 issues have been triaged by the eRequesting co-chairs. Some of those are coming to the meeting today. One of those has been reconciled, which was the technical correction. So co-chairs can approve the technical corrections. They don't need to come to the work group. They're just minor technical corrections to the specification that, as we've stated back here, does not impact the behaviour of conformant applications, includes correction, spelling, grammar, and errors, and those sorts of things. So there was a technical correction, which was a invalid example. So that's been discussed with the co-chairs, and we've reconciled that issue. So that's where we're at. We're going to go through some of these ballot issues now today to start reconciling them. And that's probably where the rest of the meeting will go. I'll just pause there for a sec, run through that all pretty quickly. Do we have any comments on any of that before we move on into the next part of the meeting?
It's Vince here. Can you let us know what the technical correction was, just so we don't all comment on the same thing?
Yeah, sure. I can actually, yep, let's jump to it. So like I said, on this page, we do have all the issues. You can link out to them from this Jira link. You'll see down here, there is a technical correction, this one here, 51917. Show that link. Make my screen a bit bigger. Put it in the chat. If anyone wants to look at it themselves. So this technical correction was about the group identifier search parameter. So we had some examples on the task page that used the incorrect parameter. It's supposed to be group dash identifier. The actual example used group identifier without a dash. So the fix here is to put the dash in to correctly have the example showing correctly.
That's great. Thanks.
Okay. Right. So ballot and reconciliation responsibilities. So I went through this the other week as well, but we'll just highlight here for everyone in the TDG so we understand what we're doing and how we're doing it. So balloters review the specification, they raise feedback and vote in Jira. So even if you're not voting in the ballot, you can still raise feedback in Jira. So you can raise issues on the specification. What balloters do, they either look at issues that have already been raised, or they raise their own feedback on the specification and then vote on those. So what you'll see is, I can actually probably use that example that we just looked at as a good one. So this is a Jira issue. It was raised as a technical correction and it was voted on. So you'll see here that there was a ballot vote against this. It was an affirmative vote, just saying, look, it's just something we've identified. It's not going to prevent publication, but it has been voted on this issue. So, so you can have issues in the specifications that have no votes, but for them to be looked at and triaged as part of ballot, there will be a vote on the issue. And balloters can either raise their own issues or they can vote on other people's issues. But that's what gives us the criteria for going through ballot reconciliation. So this list, again, you'll see here, these are the votes, and they may or may not. There is no overall vote for the specification, but that's, you can vote on issues. So you can vote affirmative on an issue saying, hey, there's a technical correction or something that we need to fix. It doesn't really matter if we fix it or not. You can still publish. We can have a negative vote on an issue saying, hey, there's an issue in the specification. You have to fix it before you publish. I think it's a major issue, so I'm going to vote negative on that issue. And then if you've voted negative on any issue, your overall vote becomes negative for the ballot. If you've only voted positive, then your overall vote is positive for the ballot. So, and this gives us the summary of that in the ballot definition. So once we have votes on ballot issues, the co-chairs run triage meetings. So we'll go through those as the eRequesting co-chairs, and we will look at them, prioritize them, and then prepare draft dispositions, which is a preliminary reconciliation package. So you'll see for this meeting, we try and send these out 7 days before a meeting of issues that we want to discuss in a TDG with the preliminary reconciliation. So the ones that we have today, co-chairs of triage, we've looked at, we think this is the resolution. We then bring them to the TDG. Now, they're either physically brought to a TDG like we are today, or we might also do electronic votes as well, which are done out of session. We might prepare a bundle. We'll tell you in a meeting that here's an eRequesting bundle. We'll send you the email saying, here's the electronic vote that you can conduct. We'll open those and then report back in a meeting about the outcome of those electronic votes. So we'll either do them in person in a TDG meeting, or we'll be doing them via electronic vote. But either way, it's the TDG responsibility to vote on those dispositions and either accept or reject them. So while issues have been brought up by validators or voted on by validators, it's the TDG that is actually doing the resolution of those issues to our satisfaction. At the end of the resolution period, once we've gone through all the ballot issues, HL7AU will contact ballotters to withdraw votes in JIRA. So that's going back to the ballotters and saying, well, you voted on this issue. Has it been satisfactorily resolved for you? And they can withdraw their votes. And then at the end of that, we'll actually confirm whether the ballot has passed or not based on that 60%. If we've got a 60% affirmative based against negative, then the ballot will have passed and we'll be able to publish. Or if we haven't reached that, we may have to do reballoting and go through another cycle. For dispositions, so this is what TDG is going to vote on, determine what the action is for these issues. There's a number of different resolutions we can apply to issues. One is consider for future use. So that's one where we've reviewed it and we don't wish to make the change in the current release of the specification, but we'll consider making a change in a future version of the specification. So if something comes up, something's brought up, we don't think it needs to be part of release 1 of eRequesting, we can resolve it as a consider for future use resolution. There is persuasive, and this applies to all of these apply to change requests or technical corrections, that the proposed change were made more or less as proposed. So there was a proposal in the issue, we're going to accept it as is. And then there's persuasive with modification, which is a change will be made to the specification that addresses the issue that was identified, but it is noticeably different from the one proposed. So this is where there might have been, we'll actually go through some of these today, where there might have been some suggestion in the issue, but we'll look to just change it slightly. But overall, we accept that the issue needs to be resolved. Not persuasive, no change will be made to the specification. The resolution description will indicate why. It may be because the work group disagrees with the submission or because the issue can't be addressed with the specification. And then not persuasive with modification. This is a bit of a strange one, but it certainly has happened in AU Core and other specifications where the work group disagrees with the issue raised and will not make the requested change, but will make some other sort of change to the specification, generally to provide more clarification. So this might be the specification was ambiguous, and that might have caused the issue to be raised. And we'll say, well, not going to make a change based on that issue, but we will go make some other change in the specification so it's clearer to other people when they're looking in the future. And then duplicate or retracted. So a duplicate, when we're going through this, we may find issues that are the same as others. So we'll just vote to say that this is identical to another issue and the resolution is captured on the other issue, or retracted. So the submitter has closed their own issue prior to resolution. So then there's no action on us for that. So that's what we'll be doing now so when we're looking at the resolution to any of these, we're also looking at what type of resolution it is, and therefore the actual resolution itself as well. Any questions on that before we move on? Okay. Well, we'll get into the meat of it now. So these are the ballot issues that we're looking to discuss and resolve in the TDG today. So these were sent out a week ago, so you've had a chance to have a look at it, hopefully. They have draft dispositions with them. We'll discuss those. We can choose to change those in the meeting. So they are just what the co-chairs have triaged and prepared as a draft, but they are open to discussion and change in this meeting. And you'll see here we've got a proposed disposition. We've got some are persuasive with modification. And then we've got the category here. So normative, so it's a normative change to the specification. We're actually changing something that implementers would need to change to utilize in the specification. And then informative, which is more around our guidance material. Looking at going through those. So we'll get used to doing this. This is something we're going to be doing now for the next few months, depending on how many issues. We've only got 13 at the moment. I think for our ballot for comment, we ended up with 54. There's every chance we may end up with more than that now. So that's why we will do some of these as electronic votes. But today is our first run, so we'll get used to the process, but we will be quite familiar with it as we get further through this process. So I might open up the first one. So these are in JIRA. I'll just give you a bit of a overview of how this is laid out and what it looks like. So we've got our issue number up the top here, 551501. We've got the title, add support for search parameter, task, part of, and search modifier, rev include, or task, part of. It was raised on this version of the specification, so 100 ballot. That's the version it was raised against. We've got here the resolution description. So this is the draft that the co-chairs, as part of triage, have identified as the potential resolution to this issue. You'll also see the draft resolution here. So what we're saying here is that we think it's persuasive, and this is the reason why and what we're going to do. But down the bottom, it has the actual issue that was raised by whoever raised it. And then we've got down here the votes against that as well. So this issue itself was actually raised prior to ballot. It was one that Steph had raised and we didn't get to before we took our ballot snapshot. So this is actually an issue we probably would have done through BAU in the TDG, but didn't get to it. So it has just come up in ballot instead. So I'll go through what this is. For the eRequesting task group, it's considered the anchor of the eRequesting data architecture for fillers to discover and manage fulfillment tasks for the same order and to retrieve their focused diagnostic requests and related resources. To enable fillers to perform this query on the task group using a rev include to return the same search bundle, eRequesting task diagnostic request that references the AU eRequesting task group or task part of. So basically saying we need a rev include search parameter on our task group. And she's proposing that we add the search parameter task part of and support for rev include to the task profile guidance and AU requested capability statements with the following conformance expectations. So the server would implement that and the others may use it. There's a lot of words there. So what I might do, you'll see here, there's also a related URL, which points to the part of the specification where this might have come up or where this relates to. And so it's on our eRequesting task profile. And I might actually jump to our general guidance because it's got a diagram in here that helps us out. So this is our eRequesting group, and we have here a task group. And then we have tasks. We can have our diagnostic request tasks or a communication request task that is used for tracking the fulfillment of our diagnostic request or our communication request. So these are tracking the fulfillment of each of the individual requests. And then we have a task group that rolls all this up to say, well, all of these are part of the same order. So what this particular change is talking about is if you've done a search and you've got a task group, you can't include the tasks that are part of that group. You would have to do a separate query to then go and get the tasks as well. So this is asking for a reverse include search parameter on task group, because you'll see here that the diagnostic request tasks and the communication request task actually reference the task group. They have a part of element, that part of references the task group. So you could do an include from a task to get the task group, but there's no rev include to go the other way around. So I've got a task group. I want to go get all the tasks that are part of this group as part of the same query. So this particular issue is saying, well, we should add an extra search parameter to task group with a rev include part of. So from here, I can include all the tasks that are part of this group. Does that make some sense? Any questions on what that is? What's the issues are asking about? Okay, so we'll look at the resolution here. So again, the co-chairs have said, well, we think this is probably persuasive. And then based on that we'd accept the change. We'd add the search parameter task part of and support for the rev include task part of to the task profiles guidance and to the eRequesting active capability statements with the following conformance expectations, so that the rev include capability is consistently implemented in client systems and depend on its availability when required. So that's the proposed resolution. Happy to take any questions on that. Happy for someone to motion that we accept that. They feel so.
Michael, before we do, how would someone get hold of the task group to use in the query?
Yep, good question. Yep, happy to talk to that. So let's go have a look at our profiles and extensions, and we've got our task group. Make this a bit bigger. So we have the task group has a tag on it, and the task group has a tag of fulfillment task group, right? So you can say, go give me all the tasks that have a tag of fulfillment task group, which would give you the group. And then I'll see if we've got the example here, and you're probably going to do that based on the placer group number. Okay, so here's the tag. So get me the task where the tag is fulfillment task group. And then here, there's some other examples here where it's include, that does the includes. Here's using the group identifier, which is the one that had that technical issue on it. So go get me all the tasks where the group identifier has this identifier of ECM and the like. So basically using the placer group number, maybe the diagram might be better to do this. Okay, so the group has a placer group number on it. So this might be when someone walks in and they've got their request and it's got a unique identifier on it. You can type that in and say, go get me the task group for that. And then from there, go get me all the tasks. Now, you could also just say, go give me all the tasks. I don't care about the task group, but I'm sure Angus has some reasoning on why you go task group. It's for subscriptions and the like, isn't it?
So yeah, what I do, Vince, is one we have a subscription, which just tells us there's new orders in the repository. and then I do a query for all group tasks. So on tasks where the status is requested and the tag equals the group task tag, so that I'm getting group tasks, not child tasks. And that gives me all the pending, all the requested, waiting for me to do something, group tasks. And I actually also add to that where the owner is my HPIO. I don't actually use the partOf to rev include them. Just the way I process them, maybe my own choice is I just get all the group tasks, put them into a database queue, and then go one by one, pick off the first group task, and now go and get the child task for it. That's just my way of doing it.
Right. And do you do that when the form turns up, or do you just do that proactively?
I do it. I do it both ways, right? So when orders are directed or signed to Sonic from when they're placed, I get notification immediately, and then I do this process of say, give me all group tasks that are in the requested state for my lab. But also when an order is claimed, I call the claim operation, but then I know specifically the group task I'm interested in, and so I search for it by group task ID or the barcode per se. So either way, if you know the group task you're going for because the patient presented the barcode to you, then you can say, give me the group task with the tag equals group task, and the group identifier equals the barcode the patient's given me. And then that gives you just that one. But if you're sort of chewing through a queue of stuff that's already assigned to you, then you're doing this sort of broader search that says, give me group tasks where the status is requested for my lab. So it depends on what you're trying to achieve.
Okay, no, thanks for that clarification. That's great.
I'll jump back. So if we're happy with this, I'm the chair, I can't vote, I can't motion. But if someone in TDG feels this is something we should proceed with, happy to accept the motion to make this change.
I'm happy to motion that, Michael Osborne.
Thanks, Michael. Do we have
Second,
a second?
Stuart.
Thanks, Stuart. Any other questions or comments before I launch a vote on this issue? I'll launch a vote. So this vote is to accept the resolution here of persuasive with the resolution that's on the screen here to accept the change with those details. So you can vote in the chat. If you can't use electronic vote, you can also vote by calling out your name and your vote if you can't vote electronically. Okay, been close. I'd like to get about 80% at least participation. Close there. All right, so I'll just give that another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that poll. Share the results. So we have 19 plus 1 in the chat, 20 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thank you. First one down. Many to come. Next one. eRequesting coverage profile is missing must support for mandatory elements. What I will do is, as we go through these, I will put them in the chat so you can get used to looking at these and seeing what the JIRA issue looks like, how they're put together. So AU eRequesting profile coverage is missing must support mandatory elements. So I'll just jump down to the issue description first. So the following elements in the AU eRequesting coverage profile have a minimum cardinality greater than 0, but are not currently flagged as must support. So this is coverage status, beneficiary, and payer. So as stated in our IG for mandatory elements, mandatory elements are with a minimum cardinality of greater than 0. When an element is mandatory, the data is expected to always be present. The convention in this guide is to mark all mandatory elements as must support unless they are nested under an optional element. So the requested change here is to add must support to the following eRequesting coverage profile elements: status, beneficiary, and payer, and add these. These are our default obligations, which is a requirement on the placer to populate it, for the filler and server to handle it. The server also must be able to populate it, and the patient, no error. So they're our standard obligations that we previously agreed in the TDG. But I will show you why this is an issue. So we have under our profiles and extensions, eRequesting coverage profile. And if you look at the differential table here from AU base coverage, all we have done is made type mandatory, and we've put our must support and obligations on here. And we've also set a minimum binding on this to the AU eRequesting type and self-pay codes. So we'd done that. That was all done part of the TDG. We'd voted on that. But if you look at the snapshot here, which shows all of the elements for this resource, you'll see here we've got status is 1-to-1, so it's mandatory. We have type, oh no, that's under a payer. Where did I lose it? Payer is 1-to-many, and beneficiary is 1-to-1. So we didn't discuss these. They never came up. I don't think we actually realized that they were mandatory. We can't change them. We can't make them optional because they are defined further upstream. And so they have to remain mandatory. So what this proposal is about adding this must support flag and adding our obligations to our eRequesting actors on how to handle them. And then it will be clear, because at the moment, if you just came in here and looked at this, you'd go, oh, all I've got to do is create a coverage resource and put that one thing in it, all right? Without that, we're not saying anything in the specification. We're not providing obligations on our actors. So let's look at the resolution to this one. Co-chairs have triaged this as persuasive with modification. So we think it's persuasive, but I think need to change the proposed resolution. So in this resolution description, we're looking at add the must support to the following eRequesting coverage profile elements: status, beneficiary, and payer. And then add the obligations, which is what was originally requested. But then looking here to constrain the coverage status to only active, and refer to the FIRE work group for guidance on payer when it is an organization for coverage type pay or pay concession. So let's have a little bit of a look at that as well. So if you look at the status, you can see here the status can be active, cancelled, draft, entered in error. Now, as part of our service request for a pathology or imaging request, if we were sending with it a coverage resource and it had a status, one of these, it doesn't make sense in our scenario to be exchanging something that's not active. It wouldn't be sent, wouldn't form part of the request. So there is a proposal here to just do active. We did do similar with our status on tasks, where we pulled out draft and some other status. So potentially we will change only accept active in here. And the other part is around the, I think it was payer, was it? Coverage. Payer. Yep, so payer. So if you look here, payer. So this is the issuer of the policy. So who's paying it, and it is a reference to an organization, a patient, or a related person. So if it's we're looking here at when the payer is in private pay, or it's actually concession. Just wondering, I think we discussed we might need some guidance on that. Angus, did you want to jump in on that? I think, can't remember the exact detail of discussion on that.
Sorry, Reeve.
So this is about the guidance on payer for coverage when it's an organisation when the coverage type is pay or pay concession. Because it's a reference to an organisation.
There are some examples we can look at, Michael.
Oh, yeah, yep, good call. They're in our examples here. Yep, let's have a look here. Pay concession. And we've got DVA. Let's dive in. Let's look at some JSON. Let's have a look here. So here we've got a payer which is has an IHI of this. So that's fully defined payer. And then I think we have for DVA, we have payer we're using here ABN.
Yes.
ABN for DVA.
That's right. I had the concern about where the bill type is private or concession, then what is the payer? And I think the minimum required for the payer element was the display. So you could just say,
you could just put display.
You could just say Department of Veterans Affairs, but at the moment we have a bill code called private. We have a bill code called concession, and they don't really have payers. Well, the private does, but we haven't matured to a point where we have a list of private health fund codes, which would be a lovely thing to have, but we don't. And therefore, when you say private, you now have to fill in this payer element. And what are you going to, and at a minimum, you can say display name MBF, right? But I'd argue that we don't even go that far in e-orders that we receive today. We have just a notion of private. We don't collect, and which insurer are you talking about? The doctor's saying, I want this billed privately, and then that's just worked out by the billing people, right? It's not in the order. It's nice to be in the order, but it's not. And so I'm a little bit concerned that now we've identified payer as mandatory, what are we going to set payer to in these scenarios where we're using bill codes which aren't specific, right? Like if you choose bulk bill, it's specific. We know, Medicare is going to pay. If you pick DVA, it's specific. We know DVA is going to pay. But if you pick concession, I don't know what the payer is. And if you pick private, it then falls into the complexity of like, well, now do you have to tell me which private insurer you're talking about? And, all those problems.
I mean, you've got to distinguish there between financial class, which is all the first things you talked about, versus the payer is who's actually paying. Some are implicit based on the financial class, but when you get to private or compensable or any other type of category in terms of financial class, you are no longer getting down to a specific payer per se. And in V2 world, you would have relied on things like the IN1 segment or the GD1 segment to tell you who's actually going to fork out the money.
But orders we receive today in community, we're not even getting that detail. Like there's an option to tick a box that says bill this privately, but we haven't standardized or even received today the private insurer that you intend this to be done with.
And there is, a lot of that does come with PMI type information, but even then, insurers, an interesting one, because at a patient level, it just tells you the patient have insurer, but it doesn't tell you that for that particular encounter or test whether they are actually going to use insurance, which comes from a different aspect of a combination between a financial class and whether or not they have insurance, which is where the GD1 segment comes the guarantor who's paying. And the fallback is at the end of the day, in most billing systems, you have a fallback for the patient. If you can't find anyone to send the bill to, you send it to the patient and let the patient figure out who gets the money from, where they get the money from. In the meantime, the patient has to fork out. Goes back to the old concept is even under Medicare, and if you go to some, places, patient pays and then the patient claims back from Medicare.
Vince?
I wanted to talk about a slightly different issue, which was the server obligations. I didn't understand how a server could fulfill these elements. They're able to populate.
Are they able to populate, given it's a server, so that it would actually, when it's responding to a request, it's populating the information. So, but it may not have any resources on the server that actually have data, right? So it needs to be able to, this was our default, but it's basically saying the server needs to be able to populate this if it's got data, right?
It's effectively the client populating, Vince, but the server has to support that the client has populated and not throw it away and not, it's a bit of a weird statement.
I think the
server has to support everything.
The two is the handle. So basically when the placer creates this resource, that it needs to handle it, right? It needs to accept it and handle it. And on the other side, when a filler is requesting it, it needs to be able to populate it. So if the filler is saying, give me a coverage resource, it is able to populate it with the correct data.
Would we anticipate that there is a situation where, a placer would provide information that the server just threw away?
No. So that's, handle is very broadly defined, right? Basically, handle says you can't ignore it, right? You can't.
And you don't error, yes.
Yeah. So to me, it's like if you threw it away, you were doing it very deliberately, right? As in, you can't just say, I didn't understand that, I'm going to ignore it, right? It has to handle.
I understand handle, but the able to populate, that would sort of, if you didn't have able to populate for everything that the server receives, that would imply it's just throwing stuff away.
Yeah, it is. That is our default. I don't think we have any server obligations anywhere in the IG that doesn't have these two together, right? So we have applied that consistently across the entire IG for that reason, that it has to be able to populate it, right? It has to be able to do it. Like it may not populate it because of security or the like, right? It can't give you that information, but that's it has to be able to populate. It has to do it.
But so it is true, Michael. If someone put data somewhere in an element that we didn't discuss in our spec at all, potentially the server doesn't store it. But given the way they work, it probably would and probably pass it on, but it doesn't have to. It could go, well, this data's got nothing to do with the spec. I don't need to support that. I'm going to throw it away. Now, I wouldn't write the server like that, but that would be legal.
But that's where our minimum obligations here are on our must support elements. So we've gone through anything that's got a must support flag on it. It can be optional element and still be must support, right? So we're saying if it's populated, you have to be able to handle it, right? But we haven't done that on every single element in the resources. It's only the ones that we're saying you must support them. So, and we may not have got them all. There may be others in there that we say that, we've missed something, exactly like here. Like we've identified, in theory, without us having done this, you don't have to provide status, beneficiary, or payer, or the server could throw it away, right? Because we didn't have a must support flag on it and we didn't have any obligations on it. So there was no obligation on the server to do anything with it, right? Or it could have stored it, but then not served it up to the filler because we said it wasn't a must support element. You don't have to support it.
But basically, we're saying everything is must support will also have shall able to populate on the server.
Yes, and we have been consistent across the whole thing with that.
Okay, but just getting back to the previous discussion around the payer, if you don't know who the payer is, how do you complete the coverage when the payer is mandatory?
That's the point we've got. So I think that's why here, like, there's ways to populate. The minimum you have to, it's a reference, but in a reference, all you have to do is do the display, right? You don't actually have to provide an ABN. You don't have to reference the actual organization resource, anything like that. You can just provide text. And I think our other example here just, I know it didn't either.
So the obvious kludge is when it's private, you literally put here in display private, which, doesn't tell you who the payer is, but it kind of is the only kludge I can think of.
Yeah. So I think that's what the intent is here. We don't know what really, I mean, this is broader than eRequesting as well, I think. So that was kind of the point about what do we do for when the pay type is private or pay concession, looking to the FHIR work group to provide some guidance on how we might do this.
Okay, so we're intending that there will be some recommendation as to how to populate that.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is, even if we don't make this must support, it's still a mandatory element, right? It's the cardinality is one and we can't change it.
And it's come from higher up. So in a way, we're caught and we're now seeking advice higher up, going, well, what are we meant to do here?
Who are we seeking advice from? International?
FHIR work group. So we'll raise another issue to take the FHIR work group related to this one, because we don't think we can resolve it. So our resolution is, yes, well, let's put the must support so that shows that you have to support them, show how you have to support it, constrain the status to only active, and then seek some guidance, right? So what do we do when we don't know who the payer is?
Okay, so how do we ensure that doesn't get lost, the seeking guidance? Because we not only have to have guidance, we actually need to incorporate it back into the
So another issue will get created for the FHIR work group that then we can track. And we can have an action on this. There will be others. There will be others that we refer to the FHIR work group or to AU Core or somewhere else as well. So we'll track those and relate it back to this one so that we know that related to this one, that other issue has been raised.
Okay, great.
Okay. There's no other discussion. Would anyone be interested in motioning this as a persuasive modification with this resolution?
I'm happy to move that.
Okay, thanks, Vince. Do we have a second?
I'm happy to second, Jai.
Thanks, Jai. Okay. Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I'll launch the vote. Find the right button. Hopefully you can see it. Yep, vote's coming in. Okay, so that's the vote to accept the resolution on our eRequesting coverage, as you can see on the screen. Okay, we got about 60% of participants, so if we can get a few more people voting, that would be good. Any more wanting to come in? There we go, a couple more. Great. Okay, I'll just close this in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And poll, share the results. So we have 15 plus 1 in the chat, 16 affirmative, 0 negative, and 6 abstain. So that motion has passed. Thank you. 2 down. Where are we at next? The document reference type, clinical context, and service request support. All right, let's have a look at this one. Close on the tabs. I'll put it in the chat. No, Vince, I think we've got another half hour, 12:30.
Okay, didn't have that in mind. Sorry, I'm gonna have to leave shortly, but I'll hang on for a couple of minutes.
Okay, so this is the change is required in the eRequesting Clinical Context Document Reference profile. The change is to make document reference type must support and default obligations to use a fixed low-ink code of 107903-7 clinical note. So this is background. So previously, when we put in the clinical context document reference, we didn't have an appropriate code for it. I know there was a number of discussions. We had chats on Zulip. We had chatted in a number of eRequesting TDGs about how to code it. You'll see the original issue that we discussed in the TDG, where we created the clinical context document reference profile. We were looking at the type potentially being referral note, but it wasn't a great fit. But we were happy with everything else, the subject, the attachment, and the rules around that. So the actual decision we made at the time was we accepted the proposal without the document reference type. So the idea was that we would come back to this when there was a more appropriate code available. And that is now the case. So there is now an appropriate low-ink code. This has only just been released. And the low-ink code is clinical note. So if you have a look at that. So I don't know, Michael Osborne, do you want to talk about the new code that's available?
So we're trying to align here with TDG AU eRec 1 and an alias for clinical context. So they recommended that a clinical context is included with any requests. And one of the aliases was clinical note. When this appeared in their list, I snatched onto it, and then it's just recently come up in the August release, which is now on the NCTS. So this will validate if you're doing any IGs. So it's just, I think it's appropriate for the type.
Yeah, I think that was one of the things at the time. We said we needed a clinical note code, and there wasn't one. But now we have one. In the IG, you will see this will apply to our AU eRequesting clinical context document reference. You'll see here that we've got all the details here, but we do not have the code. There we go. I go straight past it, don't I?
It's right up the top.
Yeah.
Yep. Stop. Back down a bit. There.
Do you want to use to do my mouse for me? I still can't see it.
Give me control.
I've gone blind. Where is it? Is it on the screen?
What are you looking for? Code.
Code.
You're looking for type, aren't you?
Type. Sorry, that's why I can't find it.
There it is.
Type. So the kind of document, low ink if possible, is what this is supposed to be. So see, there's no must support on this. It's not mandatory. We basically said we didn't have anything. We didn't know what to put here, but we really should have one. So that clearly identifies this document reference as a clinical note. And so this proposal here now, is to add that in. We would have done it at the time if we had it, but we didn't have it, and we didn't like the options we had available to us. So the resolution proposed here is persuasive. So on the eRequesting clinical context document reference profile, make the document reference type mandatory, the cardinality of 1-to-1 with a fixed value of the low-ink code of 107903-7 clinical note, and then just applies our default obligations. Like I said, these are the standard ones we apply everywhere. Place to populate, filler to handle, server to handle, able to populate.
And
patient.
this is on the base one, isn't it? So this applies for radiology and pathology, same code.
Yes.
To be. Yep.
Yes. Oh, sorry. This is the document reference. So this
I know.
This is shared. Yes, this is shared between both.
But we're not.
Yes.
We're not. At one stage, we found a really good one for radiology, but
That's
we couldn't
right.
find one for pathology. But now we're just going to use the one code for both.
That's correct. Yes. Any questions about that one? Someone interested in making a motion?
I'll move it.
You move to accept this resolution on the clinical context document reference. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second.
Thanks. Angus, oh, sorry, I've got a comment. No, sorry, before we go to vote, you can make a comment.
Just quickly, I think, Michael, there was a discussion about clinical note being different from clinical context. Does the low ink code adequately describe it as being something that's different from a note, like that it's a note that's different from the context?
So
I know there was specific use cases for pathology and radiology, but we also had a discrepancy, I think, if from memory, in the discussion about it being slightly different.
So we have talked here in the profile guidance, I think, which addresses that. So,
Okay.
so the clinical context is defined as the narrative information providing an overview of the individual's current clinical situation associated with the requested service. So
Okay.
that was the word straight from the EREC.DI.
Yeah, that's great.
so-
That's great.
And yeah, we definitely had all those discussions previously about there's using the service request note versus this, and so that's why this is in here. So
perfect, great, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Otherwise, I will launch the vote. Oh, hopefully you can see it. Can you see that now? So that's a vote to accept the current resolution of persuasive with the resolution described on the issue. We've got a good number of votes there. So I'll close that in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And that poll. So we have 17 plus 1 in the chat. That's 18 affirmative, 0 negative, and 4 abstain. So that motion has passed as well. Okay, one more normative one for today. Jump into the description. So the AU eRequesting IG currently references the following AU core profiles directly. So we reference AU core patient, practitioner, practitioner role, organization, and encounter. The AU eRequesting profiles, so AU eRequesting profiles are required to apply AU eRequesting actor-specific obligations and to provide a basis for adding AU eRequesting specific constraints in future if required. So there's a proposed change here is to create AU eRequesting patient, practitioner, practitioner role, organization, and encounter profiles derived from the respective AU core profiles, apply the AU eRequesting default obligations on the must support elements. No additional constraints on profiles derived from AU core are proposed at this time. And then update the AU eRequesting artifacts to reference the new AU eRequesting profiles rather than AU core profiles. I'll talk to that one a little bit. So you'll see here, I've got a diagram now, that we have these blue ones are AU eRequesting profiles that we've defined within the eRequesting IG. But we have these other profiles that are defined here in green that are AU core profiles that we reference. So for example, here in our diagnostic request, we reference an AU core encounter. We reference the requester as an AU core practitioner role. We also reference the patient, the subject, as an AU core patient. And we do this across the board. So from our consent withdrawal, from our communication request, these green profiles are AU core profiles, which is fine, except what you'll find is when we look at these profiles in AU core, and we'll pick patient as easy one. You'll see that there are must support obligations on elements in these profiles. And then obligations, and they're here populated for no one, no error, are for AU core actors. They're not for eRequesting actors. So all of these definitions and all the guidance that goes around these profiles is all AU core specific and is not tailored for eRequesting. So the proposal here is to create eRequesting, sorry about that, eRequesting profiles that will inherit from AU core. So they will be of type AU core patient, AU core organization, and the like. But then what we will do is we'll take the must support obligations that we inherit from AU core and apply our own actor obligations. So in here, we will have an AU eRequesting placer shall populate if known, right? And we'll have an AU eRequesting server shall be able to populate and handle. And we'll have an AU eRequesting filler shall handle on these. So that's the proposal at the moment. It also means that anything we want to do in the future with these, if we want to change cardinality or add other must supports, they are in the eRequesting profile that then we can actually define how they're used within the eRequesting context, as opposed to AU core. AU core is generic and not use case specific. So we'll be able to have our own profiles of these. They'll be fully conformant with AU core, but we'll be able to add our own obligations and constraints over it over time. So going back to that, the resolution proposed on this is that the draft resolution here is that it's persuasive. And what we would do is create AU eRequesting patient, practitioner, practitioner role, organization, encounter profiles derived from respective AU core profiles, apply the default obligations, and update the eRequesting artifacts to reference new eRequesting profiles rather than AU core ones. So we're not actually here changing any constraints. So as part of this is no additional constraints on profiles. So if you're implementing them now against AU core, and when this change is made now against eRequesting, there is no change. We would just have the obligations defined now as eRequesting profiles. Does that make sense? Does anyone have questions on that? Anyone interested in motion to accept that?
What I think I asked this before. What happens when those, like there's turtles all the way down, isn't there? Like let's say patient, right? So we profile patient as an eRequesting patient, but we change nothing. But I presume if I go look at patient, it has the managing organization reference on it, which references organization.
Yep.
And so
yeah,
now
so
do we need to profile that? No, like the web goes deeper, doesn't it?
It does. So that would be so that's part of this update eRequesting artifacts to reference eRequesting profiles rather than AU core profiles, right? So so the reference and I believe, I don't know, Jamie may be able to jump in here as an IG author. She may have just joined.
I'm here, yes.
Do you have a thought on how, when you're authoring, these changes would apply?
How far it would go? It's a good question, actually, that I hadn't considered, like how deep we go. When I looked at this, I was thinking of the ones that are directly referenced, so the ones that are listed where we've referenced that profile type. But you're right, like within patient, there will be others that are referenced, and I'm not sure. I would have to have a look into that as to how far it should go.
I think
If
it's a given. If it's a must support, it's a given, probably, right? It's probably the other ones, right? The other,
So because of obligations, wasn't it? So
Hmm.
we're not putting obligations on the deeper ones.
That's
Don't-
correct. Yeah.
Unless it's must support, right? So if we've somehow defined something on what a resource must support, and that resource has a mandatory reference to something else, then we're now obliged.
Yeah,
You're gonna
it
have
seems like we would
profile
have
that, don't
to.
we?
Mm.
I think that's definitely something we'd need to confirm
I think it's
during
definitely a step in the
implementation of
right
this.
direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And I mean,
step in the right direction. It's just the next question is further down, you know.
How far?
yeah, I think one of the
Counter's probably a good example, because surely that has reference all over it.
let's have a look. A core encounter. Yeah, so if references a core
Yeah,
patient,
references episode
and
of
it's a
care.
must, and it's a must support.
Oh yeah,
right?
yeah, must support, but it's patient,
Yeah.
and we are profiling. So that's now
Yeah.
going to change. How does that work? That's now going to change to AUE rec patient, or it's
I
Yeah.
would think so, but again,
Yes.
I'll do a bit of research. Yeah.
yeah, and then I guess episode of care below it. I mean, it's optional, so I guess we can say, well, we don't need to profile it.
Well,
because we're
there's
not
no
asking
must
for it to
support.
be-
Yeah, there's no
Yeah.
must
If
support. on
you click on the diff, we can see only what's must support. That might be easier
that. Not diff.
to look at.
Yeah, that's good.
the patient. So these ones would have to change to our ones, and we would and in we must support. So we'd be obligated now to create practitioner role, related person. Not sure.
I suppose that's part of doing this would be part of that review as well, right? We may look at this and go, you know what, we don't want to support related person in eRequesting. So we
Yes.
would constrain
Yeah.
this down and take related person out. At the moment, we don't have any visibility or ability to do anything with this because we just said, just use AE core, whatever AE core says, use that, right? So this may actually, by doing this, flush out some things that we need to look at more in eRequesting. Is that saying, well, no, related person doesn't make sense to us, take it out, right? And we have the ability to do that because we have our own profile to do that. I think also looking at cardinality as well is where the minimum cardinality for AE core is very open, as in, don't know what use case you're still not going to mandate you have to do much, right? Whereas we're going to say, well, if you're going to provide a patient, if you're going to provide a practitioner, you're probably going to provide this minimum data, which might be more than what AE core specified. So again, having those profiles gives us the ability now in requesting to know exactly what the obligation is and also say, well, is it appropriate? Do we actually need to change some of this? At the moment, it's kind of sort of set and forget. Just whatever AE core says, just look at that. So I think what we will find is there will be a number of things when we have these requesting profiles, we'll probably ask more questions about some of these and need to refine it further. But at least they'll be in the IG then and front of mind for us, and we'll also have the ability to make those changes in eRequesting.
So in terms of actually producing the profiles, then are we saying we would keep the references within, say, Encounter to the AU core profiles until we did a further analysis and decided if we would profile those?
Oh yeah, so this is definitely where this is only proposing to profile the ones we directly reference.
Mhm.
All right, so I think we would look at them separately if we find them during this process.
But
So producing the
Jane's point
profile
is,
for
as soon as
sorry, Angus, go on.
so we might be saying we're only doing the ones that we directly profile, but as soon as we do this, we directly now profile the others. So
So to profile encounter, for example, if I'm producing the profile, I will be referencing AU core profiles that aren't agreed in this list. So
yeah, so
related person or
related person,
condition or procedure.
Yeah. I think, yeah, like I think that might be something that we then come back around to and say, well, yeah, how far do we go, right?
Mm.
Because yeah, we'll end up profiling a whole heap of ones that we potentially haven't determined. Because whether we actually want to profile them might be a different question, right? As in, or we constrain them out.
I think
So just the top level of turtles.
but
But
for
if it's
now, I think
like here, if it references AU core practitioner, we would reference AU eRequesting practitioner, right? Because we have one for that.
Mm.
agreed. But like the
And you
related
just,
person one's a good example. Like we don't have one, so we're now going to make one, or we're going to now change our encounter profile that we're now profiling, which initially we were changing nothing, but now we're going to say related person is not must support.
Mm. Or keep it as a AU correlated person reference.
Yeah, we either have to create a profile or we have to get rid of it.
Just leave it. Or why do you have to? Why can't you just leave it?
Yeah.
And think about it as you develop it further.
Yeah.
It's not. I don't think there's any
I
imperative
think,
to change it or drop it straight up.
yeah, definitely we have to climb one mountain before the next, right? So start somewhere. And
Jamie, does that fit, do you think, or do you think we actually should be going all the way?
I kind of feel like it would be beneficial to have a clear, if we're going to do the work to produce the profiles, I feel like it would be better to have a clear path of how far we're going to go. Because I feel like once you're creating and you're testing the profile, you kind of want to know like what exactly we're going to want to do with it. That would probably be my preference, to have a clear way, but Brett, you probably will have.
I think we need to clearly understand what we're doing here, because we could make this step now, and then, I mean, this could exponentially explodes, right? As you go, the tree widens, right? So if we make the wrong decision now, we're going to be like, and we start just following our nose, creating more profiles
before we've decided.
We suddenly might realize, like, oh my God, we've just committed to creating like hundreds of profiles as they band out.
Brett? Yeah.
I think you just use obligations to bring in what you want to do, right? And what you want to make sure is supported. And then you can even constrain out data types if you don't want to have them now, right? And so, and you're still meeting the AU core obligations even, because you're doing one of those options. So you're fine, right? So I think you decide what you want to include with your obligations, but it means that it is clearer because at least you've got specific obligations for eRequesting that you're bringing in. And like I personally wouldn't exclude stuff, but that's just, it means someone might do it. But you have no obligation to deal with it. You can actually kind of explicitly do that if you want to, right? Which is kind of what I think you want to do, because you just want to say these are the things that we recognize. Yeah.
Do we inherit the must supports from the must supports inherit up?
But you're not in the role. You're not in that AU core responder or requester role, right? So you're not actually in those. You're not implementing those actors.
Yeah. So
you add
thing.
your own. Yeah, you add your
we
own.
We inherit the
actors.
must support, but we will apply our new obligations, which are our eRequesting obligations, right? So we do inherit the must support, but not the obligation. We've got our own actors, so we don't have AU core actors, which is the kind of the point. That's the point of this change.
Yeah, and so even though it says like must supports kind of indicate, I guess, what AU core does, and if you are going to do something different, like you're going to do something that's not compatible with AU core on the must support elements, you probably want to, that's a variance, right? So if you want to just say in eRequesting you need to do these things, or you might might do these things, if known or whatever, right? And also just it's more the handling obligations that you'll be able to define which things people need to pay attention to, and if related person's not one of them, you don't do it, right? And there's no obligation that people deal with it. And you can constrain it out if you decide you don't want to do some things. You're still doing essentially AU core compliant if you're doing something, right?
We can't constrain it out, can we? Like if someone creates an AU core counter with a related person because that was conformed to AU core, and then they use it in eRequesting, we can't error because they've got a related person. We can say, well, it means nothing to us, but we can't.
Well,
get
your
rid
actors
of it,
don't need to you don't need to behave the same, but it does create impact, right? If you don't allow the stuff, because it means that people have to do integration. If they're going to take an AU patient, they have to trim out stuff and make sure they're compliant. But there's different rules anyway, so they're going to have to think about it. Anyway, that's good. We showed more chats at the Connectathon.
Yeah. Are we comfortable with making this first step? Or do we?
It's not clear to me how far we're going, so I don't feel confident, but I'm happy to be persuaded otherwise.
I think this resolution, sorry, am I on the right one? Wrong one again.
You're not on the right one.
So this one is about to create the eRequesting patient, practitioner role, organization, and counter profiles, apply that and update eRequesting artifacts to reference the new eRequesting profiles. So this resolution is clear about what we're doing in that context, as in it's not saying go create anything else other than what's in that resolution. So
I think that's a very good set to do, for sure.
And so for any referenced profiles within those, like the encounter one, for example, where you've got condition or procedure, we will just leave it as the AU core profile.
Yeah.
Okay.
But any that we have a profile like patient, we will change to eRec patient, not core patient.
Yeah. Only these ones, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The simplest thing you do is just put obligations on it. Right, but you'll probably have some other rules that you want to add.
That's all. And again, this is all this is proposing is the obligation. So I know we're at time, but if we have the opportunity to vote on this one now, someone would like to motion, I would like to go ahead with that if we can. If anyone's open to motion, do we need to carry it?
No, I'm sure David McKillop on motion.
Okay.
As is.
Yeah. Do we have a second?
Yep, Michael.
Thanks, Michael Osborne. All right, I'll launch the vote and then we can close the meeting after that. Okay. There is a vote to accept this current motion to create those eRequesting profiles. Okay, we have most people getting close. So let's give it another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and that. So we have 14 plus 1, so that's 15 affirmative, 0 negative, and 5 abstain. So that motion has passed. Okay, well, thanks everyone. We got through all the normative changes today, which is great. The informative ones will carry over. Will be notice given before meetings about what's going to be voted in the next meeting. So keep an eye out for those emails. We've got Connectathon next week. Our next meeting in 2 weeks' time, we'll do a report back from the Connectathon. We'll continue with ballot resolution. So thanks everyone. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. See ya.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.